My HOA president stole my dog's artisanal biscuits. I fought back with a glitter bomb, and that's when the real war began. It all started with a set of artisanal dog biscuits. I know, it sounds ridiculous, but that's where the madness began. I'd moved into the Whispering Willows subdivision 6 months prior, lured by the promise of manicured lawns and a peaceful, quiet life. What I got was Brenda. Brenda was the HOA president, a title she wore with the same grim finality as a medieval executioner. She was a woman in her late 50s, with a helmet of blonde hair that looked like it could deflect small arms fire, and a gaze that could curdle milk from 50 paces. Her patrol vehicle was a golf cart she drove with unnerving slowness, a clipboard always resting on the passenger seat, ready to document infractions like a daisy growing a millimeter too tall. My first package, the dog biscuits for my golden retriever, Gus, vanished from my porch an hour after the delivery notification. I figured it was a simple mistake, a porch pirate just passing through. Annoying, but it happens. Then, a week later, a new set of noise-canceling headphones I'd ordered for work went missing. The delivery photo clearly showed the box sitting right by my welcome mat. I checked with neighbors. No one saw a thing. A pattern was starting to form. The final straw was a custom-framed photo I'd ordered for my mom's birthday. It was a picture of her and my late father. It was irreplaceable. When that disappeared, something inside me snapped. I invested in a high-quality doorbell camera, the kind with motion alerts and crystal-clear night vision. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. I started to think maybe the thief had moved on. Then I ordered a new graphics card for my PC, something expensive enough that I knew would come in a distinct, tempting box. The delivery truck came and went. I got the notification on my phone. I sat at my desk watching the live feed, my heart thumping in my chest. For an hour, nothing but leaves skittering across the driveway. Then the golf cart appeared at the end of my street, crawling forward like a predator. It was Brenda. She parked across the street, pretending to inspect a sprinkler head. She glanced left, then right. Then, with a speed that defied her age, she scurried across the pavement, snatched the box from my porch, and practically threw it into the basket of her golf cart before peeling away. The whole thing took less than 15 seconds. I had her. I saved the video, a triumphant, angry grin spreading across my face. This was it. The public shaming, the police report, the end of her reign of terror. I presented the evidence at the next HOA meeting. I played the video on a projector for everyone to see. There was Brenda, clear as day, her sour lemon face illuminated by the afternoon sun, grabbing my property. A wave of murmurs went through the room. I looked at Brenda, expecting shame, maybe even panic. Instead, she just looked bored. When the video ended, she stood up, smoothed down her beige pantsuit, and addressed the room. "As you can see," she began, her voice dripping with condescension, "I was simply securing Mr. Henderson's package. Our community covenants, Section 4, subsection C, clearly state that all deliveries must be retrieved within 1 hour to maintain the aesthetic harmony of our neighborhood. This package was left unattended. I took it to the HOA office for safekeeping. He could have retrieved it at any time during business hours." My jaw hit the floor. She was twisting it. She was lying through her teeth and making me out to be the negligent one. The board, a collection of her spineless cronies, nodded along in solemn agreement. My complaint was dismissed. The police said that without proof she intended to keep it, it was an HOA matter, not a criminal one. I was defeated, humiliated, and incandescent with rage. Brenda hadn't just stolen from me. She'd weaponized the very rules of the community against me. That night, I decided that if Brenda wanted to operate outside the law, then so would I. My grandfather was a demolitions expert in the Army, and later a hobbyist model rocketeer. He'd taught me a thing or two about chemical reactions and contained energy. Nothing dangerous, he'd always say, just persuasive. I spent the next week in my garage. I took a sturdy cardboard box and reinforced the inside. I bought a cheap GPS tracker and a simple tripwire mechanism tied to a spring-loaded switch. The payload wasn't meant to injure, only to horrify. I mixed a pound of FFG black powder, the kind used for old muskets, which produces an obscene amount of thick, white, sulfurous smoke, with 2 entire jumbo-size containers of the finest, most obnoxious, iridescent purple craft glitter I could find. It was a glitter smoke bomb, designed to create a loud, dramatic bang and a catastrophic, impossible-to-clean mess. I placed the beta box labeled Imported Italian Leather Goods on my porch. I armed the system and went inside to watch the camera feed, my hands trembling slightly. It took less than an hour. Brenda's golf cart came rolling into view. She did her usual routine, the fake inspection of a neighbor's rose bush, the casual glances. She approached my porch, her eyes gleaming with petty triumph. She bent down, her hands wrapping around my carefully constructed package of chaos. She lifted it. She turned and walked back toward her golf cart, a smug little smile on her face. I watched on my phone as the GPS dot started moving, tracing her path back to her own house, number 14, 2 streets over. The dot stopped. It was inside her house. I crept across my lawn, then my neighbor's, until I was crouched behind the manicured hedges bordering her property. My phone clutched in my hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. I just wanted to hear it. Then, through her pristine living room window, I saw her place the box on her antique mahogany coffee table. She reached for a box cutter. My breath hitched. Then I heard it. Not the loud bang I expected, but a muffled, percussive thump from inside the house, immediately followed by the sound of shattering glass and a single blood-curdling shriek. A thick cloud of gray-white smoke, glittering with a million points of purple light, billowed out of her shattered bay window. It looked like a unicorn had exploded. My first thought wasn't triumph, it was a cold, sharp spike of pure terror. What if I'd miscalculated? What if that thump wasn't just the charge, but Brenda hitting the floor? The shriek echoed in my ears, but it had sounded more like rage than pain. At least, that's what I told myself. My plan to savor the moment was gone, replaced by a frantic urge to be anywhere else. I scrambled backward, staying low behind the hedges, my feet sinking into the soft mulch. I didn't stop until I was back inside my own house, the door locked, the deadbolt thrown. I ran to my upstairs window, the one that overlooked the street, and peeked through the blinds. The scene was chaos. Neighbors were pouring out of their houses, pointing at Brenda's home. The glitter smoke was still leaking out of the broken window, dusting her prize-winning rose bushes in a shimmering coat of cosmic purple. Then the front door flew open and she staggered out, a vision from some psychedelic nightmare. Her perfect blonde helmet was blown askew, streaked with black soot. Her face, her clothes, her skin, everything was coated in a thick layer of the iridescent glitter. She looked like she'd been tarred and feathered by a gang of glam rock angels. She wasn't hurt. She was apoplectic. She stood on her lawn, shaking a purple fist at the sky, and screaming words that would have earned anyone else a dozen HOA fines. Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens grew into a deafening roar. A fire truck and 2 police cruisers screamed down the street, lights flashing. My brief moment of satisfaction was completely eclipsed by the flashing red and blue lights painting my living room walls. This had escalated far beyond a simple prank. This was now a full-blown emergency response. I saw the firefighters enter her house with oxygen tanks. I saw the police setting up a perimeter. They were treating it like a real bombing. An hour later, there was a knock on my door. It was a police officer, a young guy with a serious face. "Sir, did you see or hear anything unusual this afternoon?" "Over at number 14, he asked, gesturing with his thumb toward Brenda's house. I put on my best concerned neighbor face. "I heard a loud bang," I said, making my voice tremble just a little. It sounded like a car backfiring, but much louder. I was just about to look outside when I heard the sirens. "Is everyone okay?" He nodded, scribbling in his notepad. "The homeowner is fine, just shaken up. And sparkly. Seems someone sent her some kind of mail bomb." My blood ran cold. Mail bomb. That's what they were calling it. I was no longer a prankster. I was a domestic terrorist who used glitter as a weapon of mass destruction. The next few days were agonizing. The neighborhood was buzzing. Brenda had become a local celebrity, a martyr for the cause of suburban order. She gave interviews to the local news, standing in front of her boarded-up window, dabbing at her eyes and talking about the cowardly attack, meant to silence her. She never mentioned stealing a package. Oh no. In her version of the story, the box had been left on her doorstep, a clear threat from someone who hated the rules, who hated everything Whispering Willows stood for. She was using my revenge to consolidate her power, turning the community against some phantom menace, which was, of course, me. I thought I was in the clear. The police had no leads. There was no evidence pointing to me. My doorbell camera showed nothing but me leaving for work in the morning and coming home in the evening. I had been careful, but I had underestimated Brenda. I underestimated the depths of her vindictive fury. A week after the explosion, an email went out to all residents. An emergency HOA meeting. Attendance was mandatory. The community hall was packed. Brenda stood at the podium, looking solemn and resolute. A small patch of purple glitter was still visible in her left eyebrow, a tiny, sparkling trophy of my work. She recapped the horrific event and then transitioned. "The police are doing their best," she said, her voice steely. "But we, as a community, must also protect ourselves." She talked about new security measures, more cameras, stricter patrols. Then she paused, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed directly on me. A cold knot formed in my stomach. "The authorities have recovered fragments from the device," she announced, holding up a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small blackened piece of circuit board. "They've identified this as part of a GPS tracking unit, a sophisticated, short-range model." She let that hang in the air for a moment. A piece of technology that would require a certain amount of technical expertise to rig as a trigger. She was painting a picture, and I was the subject. My reputation as the quiet guy who built his own computers was suddenly being twisted into a sinister profile. I felt dozens of eyes turning toward me. My face grew hot. This was her counterattack, public and brutal. Before I could even formulate a response, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a motion alert from my own security system. I glanced down at the screen and my heart stopped. The live feed showed 2 police cars parked in my driveway. Then, as the entire room watched me, the sound of a heavy official knock echoed from my phone's speaker. They weren't at the meeting to get me. They were already at my house. Every head in the room swiveled towards me. The knock from my phone's speaker seemed to reverberate through the silent hall. Brenda's lips curled into a triumphant smirk. She had me. She had orchestrated this perfectly, timing her grand revelation with the police arriving at my door. I was going to be perp-walked out of my own home in front of the very people she'd turned against me. But in her hubris, Brenda had made one critical, fatal error. She assumed I was stupid. I took a deep breath, stood up, and looked directly at Brenda. "You're right, Brenda," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. It was a GPS tracker, and it did require some technical expertise. I held up my phone, making sure everyone could see the screen. Expertise I used to make sure I had an alibi. I tapped the screen, switching from the live feed to my saved recordings. This is the motion-activated footage from my garage camera. It has a timestamp. I turned the phone around so the board members next to me could see. On the screen was footage of me, in my garage, working on my old lawnmower. The timestamp in the corner clearly showed the exact time of the explosion at Brenda's house. I was at home, covered in grease, miles away from the detonation at least, as far as this video was concerned. "As you can see," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "I was in my garage, wrestling with a faulty carburetor when the incident occurred. I have footage covering the entire 2-hour period. It was a lie, of course. I had filmed myself working on the lawnmower the day before, a pre-recorded alibi I'd prayed I wouldn't need." Brenda's face fell. Her triumphant narrative was crumbling. That doesn't prove anything," she stammered. "You could have set a timer." "Maybe," I said, shrugging. "But Brenda, you said the police found the GPS tracker, right?" I didn't wait for her answer. "That's funny. Because a GPS tracker has a unique serial number, and that serial number is registered to an owner. You see, when I ordered the tracker, I didn't register it to myself. I was worried something like this might happen. I paused for dramatic effect, letting my gaze drift across the stunned faces of my neighbors. I registered it to the person whose name was on the credit card used to pay the HOA's monthly web hosting fees. I looked back at Brenda, whose face had gone from pale to the color of ash. "Your husband, Brenda." I registered the tracker in his name. A collective gasp went through the room. Brenda's husband, a meek accountant named Arthur, who was sitting in the front row, looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Brenda opened her mouth, but only a strangled squeak came out. She had walked right into my trap. In her eagerness to frame me, she presented the one piece of evidence that could lead directly back to her own household. The police would subpoena the GPS company, find Arthur's name, and their entire investigation would pivot. Her story of a mysterious package showing up on her porch would fall apart under the first hint of scrutiny. Why would an attacker use a tracker registered to the victim's own husband? The only logical conclusion was that the package was never meant for her. It was stolen. I didn't wait for the fallout. I turned and walked out of the community hall, leaving a scene of utter chaos behind me. By the time I got home, the police cars were gone. They had knocked, but with no warrant and no answer, they had left. The next day, the Whispering Willows online forum exploded. Brenda was forced to step down as HOA president pending the police investigation. The story she had so carefully crafted now looked like a desperate, vindictive lie. People started talking. Other residents came forward with their own stories of missing packages, of Brenda's overbearing enforcement and petty tyrannies. It turned out my artisanal dog biscuits were just the tip of the iceberg. The police did indeed trace the GPS. Faced with evidence of a tracker registered to his name being found in an explosive device in his own home, Arthur cracked in about 5 minutes. He confessed everything. He told them about Brenda's escalating package theft, her hoard in the spare bedroom filled with other people's property. He'd known all about it, and had been too terrified of her to say anything. The glitter bomb wasn't some outside attack. It was a stolen package that had literally blown up in her face. Brenda was charged with multiple counts of mail theft and filing a false police report. Her reign was over, not with a bang, but with a plea bargain and court-ordered therapy. They had to sell their house to pay the legal fees and restitution. The last I saw of her, she was loading a U-Haul, her perfect blonde hair looking dull and lifeless, a fine dusting of purple glitter still stubbornly clinging to the brim of her sun hat. The new HOA board is reasonable, my packages arrive untouched, and life in Whispering Willows is finally as peaceful as advertised. Sometimes I see Gus chewing on his artisanal biscuits on the porch, and I smile. It turns out sometimes you have to fight fire with glitter